Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to discuss my favorite topic, which is stress, which is kind of weird, but I think it's really critical for the times that we're in. Can you discuss what integrated training is and how we can use it to regulate stress?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me on, and I'm really stoked to be here. Um, Integrated training is the name of my business, and it's come about through my own, I guess, struggles with stress and pressure over my lifetime. I worked for 12 years as an intensive care paramedic. I did a degree in health science, but they never taught us how to leverage stress and pressure. And so all of a sudden you're out on the road and you're dealing with high pressure, high stress jobs. And I was finding out that early on in my career, I was getting overloaded by thought going into these jobs, and I couldn't perform to my true potential because I was cognitively overloaded, and I'd get sort of task focused on these jobs. And I was like, man, I've got to sort this out because, I have to make clinical decisions and decisions on extrication, and there's all these things going on in these highly emotive scenes. And a lot of what I'm doing now with my own business is those practical skills from being an intensive care paramedic, or before that I was a professional ocean lifeguard, and even just my own practical experiences of life. And what I'd sort of learned is that with all of the stuff, it has to be an integrated approach. And I guess the easiest way for me to explain that is through a practical explanation. When I work with an athlete, and when I say athlete, we're all athletes. If you sit at a desk for 8 hours, you're an athlete. You have to train for that. We're not designed to do that. Any specialization, painting, building, you specialize, you're an athlete. And again, you have to train to be specialized. And so when I work with someone, how I look at them is just an integration of body systems. We are made up of 11 body systems. And so I break those systems down because that's where you'll find the imbalance. And, just to name some of the key body systems: the skeletal system, the muscular system, the nervous system, the digestive system, the respiratory system, our breathing. And so I get people to allocate a number. How much time, energy, and focus do you put in on each of these systems? And most athletes, they will put the most time, energy, and focus into their cardio and their muscular system, right? And what we see time and time again is the two systems that are given the least amount of time, energy, and focus are the respiratory system, your breathing, and the nervous system. And the thing is, they are the two, all these systems are important in terms of leveraging stress and pressure, but the nervous system and the breathing system are two of the most important systems in order to be able to execute under pressure. And they're the two systems that we're giving the least amount of attention. And when I came into this performance environment, because again, I don't have a background in sporting performance. My background is in health science. When I came into the sporting world, I was absolutely staggered to realize that this foundational stuff was not part of their existing training. It was things that athletes would have to go and look elsewhere for, right? And this is where we start to see the imbalance. And you get these athletes that get right to the very top in their field, and unless they have good foundations, they crumble, man. And you see it all the time. And once you're at the top and things start going wrong, it's very hard to go back and get the foundations right. Because what we'll often do when we're confronted in that scenario is add more load. The problem is the load is what ends up becoming the weakness. Yeah. And so, man, integrated training is just a way of looking at humans based on these individual body systems and realizing that if there's imbalance in one system, it'll have a ripple-on effect through every other system. And we see that in the breathing all the time. I know you understand this stuff, but if your breathing is off, it affects your nervous system. It affects your cardiovascular capacity. It affects your musculoskeletal system. It's everything. And so the way that these systems interact is very important, and to get an understanding of that and how, because a lot of these athletes come in and they're like, we're looking for the 1%. And it always kind of bothers me because it's like, oh, come on, you're not operating at 98%.
8%.
Yeah.
15%. So can you do me a favor? Can you kind of dig in just a little bit on the respiratory system and maybe talk about some of the bigger picture items that people are missing right now?
Yeah, well, we breathe 20 to 30,000 times a day, and most of us, or many of us, are breathing in a way that is actually detrimental to our health and performance. And where this comes from, it starts from a young age. From the age of 1 to 5, you're breathing, or most of us at that age, our breathing is impeccable. It's perfect. We then get to the age of 5 and we go to school and we start sitting a lot. We put these kids into a 90-degree position and we don't sit upright. We're compressed, right? And that compresses the lungs, it compresses the diaphragm, and the body's an adaptive machine. So the body goes, right, this is too difficult. Let's start shifting the breathing up a little bit into what we call an accessory muscle breath. This is a very insidious process, by the way. It doesn't happen overnight. You then add to that child has a visual representation of their breathing, and it's normally up into here, right? If you ask a child, where are your lungs, they'll point up here. The mind-body connection is very important. Those same children start looking at their superheroes. How do they breathe? They then look at their parents. How are they breathing? You then add stress into the picture. The stress of, like, once a kid gets through the 12, 13, 14, we start adding a bunch of stress in there, and stress affects our breathing. And so over time, we adapt, and this is called like complacent adaptation. Our breathing is one of the body systems that really adapts to stress in a negative way if we don't push back against that. And so many people have no awareness of their breathing, and when you don't have awareness of something, that's where imbalance starts creeping in. And then, we think of the stress as this external thing. And nowadays, where the stress is coming from is in our bodies. The stress is in our bodies and it's in our minds. And unless we have an understanding of where that stress is coming from, how can we change it? And so the breathing is the fundamental the thing that we're doing that regulates it's the currency for energy, right? Like bring oxygen in and shift CO2 out. And if we're not doing it in a mechanically correct way, then that ends up becoming the stress. It's like prodding the stress cycle with a hot prod, and this is so
what if
prevalent.
We start doing this superhero breathing like you're talking about? We've negatively adapted. We have poor pattern breathing. How is that now going to impact stress? So for
Yes.
chest breathing, we're slumped over for most of the day. We're not properly stacked and aligned. What's the downstream effect? Like, what's happening?
Good question. When we breathe in a pattern like that, so our breathing isn't right, that's physical stress. The mind, and that sends signals to the brain to activate the stress response. And when we think of the stress response, when we really get down to it, that's actually your autonomic nervous system. So we have two branches, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic is like having the accelerator on, adrenaline, cortisol, that upregulates us, gets us ready for battle. And the parasympathetic is like putting the brakes on. That's that calming feeling. And breathing in a pattern that is inefficient, or what we call an accessory muscle breathing, shifting the breathing up into here, using your chest and shoulders, which again, I feel like it's like an epidemic of people that are breathing badly. That ends up activating the stress response. That breathing pattern ends up activating the stress response. So if we think we're breathing 20 to 30,000 times a day, and we're doing it in a way that activates the stress response, how can we ever get out of stress? And then the other thing here is your breathing is an indirect way of manipulating or altering your autonomic tone. So you can use your breathing in a way, soft, quiet, light, slow down your breathing rate, prolong the exhale phase of the breathing, and you can create more parasympathetic tone. So this is when we start getting into like the meditation or the breathing flows that elicit a calm state. And it's such a powerful way to intercept stress because it gets us back into our bodies. It gives us that interoception, that ability to be able to regulate our internal state to intercept stress and pressure in real time.
That is a good word right there. Interoception. And I think
Yeah.
you and I both would say that the best. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you just pause for a second. The best.
Yeah, I'll restate that. So interoception is the key word there, and I would say that some of the best athletes or performers that we've worked with have a keen understanding of what's happening internally. because that's what that is like, do you understand what's going on internally? Can you match that to your external environment? And when you can regulate your breathing, like, first of all, it's recognizing what's happening to you, then regulating in the moment so that you can get yourself back on track. But that, I think, is something that these recursive loops also of seeing, like, that's the wonderful thing about wearables, if used appropriately, is I see an external signal. Now I have the internal capability to regulate myself. How are you teaching folks to tap into that more?
I think the key to all of this stuff is, with awareness alone, you will make huge adaptations to your health and performance just through awareness alone. So, when we talk about breathing, a lot of people aren't even aware of it. Because it's innervated by the autonomic nervous system, we don't need to think about our breathing. It's taken care of by that division of our...
That would make for a horrible day, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But,
for 20, 30,000 revolutions, you're having to think about this all day long?
Yeah, and your blood pressure, your heart rate, these are all things we don't have to think about. But the breathing is different because we can take conscious control of our breathing. We can inhale whole, we can prolong the exhale phase, and in that way we can adapt our breathing capacity. So we can actually, a lot of people don't even realize you can specifically train to improve your breathing capacity, to improve your breathing mechanics, to improve your CO2 tolerance, to improve your ability to use your breathing to regulate your state, your internal state in real time. This is like a superpower, man. Like when I train athletes who haven't trained breathing before and they tap into this system, it's all there waiting to be turbocharged. I mean, a lot of these athletes have, impeccable physiology, and it's just waiting to be tapped into. And the big thing that blows my mind is why is this? I said this before. Why is this not a mainstay of like performance training? And I know it's starting to garner much more attention now, but this to me is like the basics.
It's hard to quantify for coaches.
It is, yeah.
Stakeholders. Oh, X didn't go up certain kilos, but hey, they're breathing better. And I'm just saying, to be quite honest, part of the problem with the system is the people at the top that are evaluating those doing their jobs don't have the requisite skill set to do so. And so when somebody like yourself enters an organization, you're like, hey, we're going to see market change by improving our breathing mechanics, which is going to do this, this, and this. The question then is like, well, I don't see a bar moving or velocity on the field yet.
Yeah, that's this is one of the reasons why people have such poor connection to their breathing, is because you can't see that muscle. Do you have it? You can't see the diaphragm. You can see your bicep. You can see your quad. You can't see a diaphragm. Most people don't even know what the diaphragm looks like, or in terms of diaphragmatic excursion, and even being able to have a visual representation of how your diaphragm moves gives you better connection to that muscle, better ability to be able to use it to enhance performance and health. And the diaphragm isn't just a muscle of breathing, it's a muscle that improves our posture, improves intra-abdominal pressure, that pressure in your abdomen. When you inhale, your diaphragm drops down, increases the pressure in your abdomen to stabilize your lumbar spine. That pressure is then released on the exhale for distal mobility or power. You see this like when a boxer throws a punch. Inhale, they throw the punch. Even like fine motor skills are all done on the exhale. Shooting a bow and arrow, you're holding, and then you exhale, and so the breathing is like, there's so many. This is what I find fascinating about the breathing, is there's so many ways to use your breathing to enhance performance and health. It's not just around like your mechanics of breathing, how you breathe, but it's also like what we talked about, being able to tap into this thing to intercept stress in real time. Because if we think about the stress cycle, think about a time where you've got into an ice bath. What's the first thing that you notice? Yeah, when someone gives you a fright, the first thing is, well, what's that all about? That is the body. That's the stress cycle, and that's the body trying to get more oxygen in, because that oxygen needs to get to the working muscle. And so it's one of the first body systems that become upregulated is your breathing. And so if we think about that in terms of being able to leverage stress and pressure, if at the very top your breathing starts going faster, imagine if you are able to control it right there and do the opposite. Because we don't always want stress, right? And stress isn't a bad thing, but it's not that we don't want to be in a stress state. It's that we want the ability to be able to turn it up, but also dial it down a little bit. It's not about being in a calm state. It's about being in a stress state and being able to remain focused. and work with the agitation. And the best way to do that is by controlling some of these key parameters of stress. And your breathing is a massive one. When I'm working with people and teaching them sort of stress threshold training, it's almost all about doing the opposite. You breathe fast, no, you breathe slow. You hold tension in your body, no, you stay relaxed. Your mind's ticking over, no, you focus your mind. And so often it's about doing the opposite of these ingrained patterns of behavior.
So if somebody's really interested in going, okay, I want to take the next step personally to learn more about this so I can include this skill in my repertoire, whether it be for, you said all people are athletes, but I would just say to perform better in whatever that looks like for them, where can they learn more about this?
It goes back to, first of all, it goes back to like awareness alone. Just someone listening to this will probably go out and start Googling stuff, right? Or start listening to your, more of your podcast around stress. Yeah. Awareness is so powerful, man. In terms of like my work, I do one-on-one work with clients all over the world. And I guess like 70% of my work is working with people who are burnt out, man, who are really suffering with the inability to control acute stress. And chronic stress is just acute stress practiced over and over again without pushing back against it. And nowadays, we get very good at practicing acute stress because it's everywhere. Like someone pulls in front of you in the car, you get all pissed off, something happens, we can't let go of it, we hold on to it, we ruminate over it. And it's, man, this stress is everywhere. But that also gives us this opportunity to practice stress and get really good at it. And
That's a beautiful way to look at it. I love that. It's, we talk about this low grade fever of stress, but every time there is that acute stress, there's an opportunity to intervene and to get better.
Oh man, it's powerful.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently. We were talking about, he kind of pushed back on me. I would say it's a fallacy that you can, quote, manage stress. You can't manage the inputs, right? Like you as a paramedic arrive on a scene, you can't manage maybe a horrific thing that you're about to see. What you can control, though, or regain control of is how you respond. And so I guess what you're saying is this input's coming in. Now that I'm experiencing this thing, now I have a strategy to regulate in the moment, and it can be practiced. And when you practice it over and over and over and over again, that response is going to be different. It's kind of like this, the curve begins to settle.
Yeah. One thing there, man, is like, people's way of managing it, a lot of people's way of managing it is to avoid it, right? And if you avoid it, it's still going to be there, and then it becomes amplified. We talk about embracing stress, going towards stress, using stress to your advantage. Well, you're never going to get good at stress unless you go towards it, unless you go towards the fear, apprehension, tension, and with repeat exposure, you start working it out, right? You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to have all the tools. What you got to do is go towards it and get used to it, right? And get used to working in that environment. But unfortunately, a lot of people avoid it because they think stress is bad, because they've had, one bad relationship with a stress or pressure moment in their life that's impacted them, and then they taint the whole thing with that brush, and it's like, no, that's just one event. Stress is not bad for you. Stress is good for you if we learn to leverage it to our advantage to enhance performance and health. And actually, it's not that difficult. It comes back to understanding, how stress impacts us physically and mentally, getting the tools to be able to push back against stress, and practicing it. Practicing it, increases our stress threshold. But man, there's a lot of stressed people out there. There's a lot of people that are suffering, and that's what I'm learning with my own work in this field and running this Calm Under Pressure workshop out, is that, people are struggling to understand their own bodies, and they're getting stuck in this thing, and they're looking for convoluted solutions to simple problems. Becomes convoluted because we're stuck in it.
I'm very thankful that there's guys like you out there doing this work that are stepping in the gap and helping folks. So if people are interested in engaging with you, they can reach out to you on your website. I know you and Instagram. I'll put that in the show notes. And also you have a in-person workshop that you do called Calm Under Pressure, correct? Yeah,
we run that workshop every 6 weeks here in New Zealand. And 3 things that we focus on is getting people to understand the underlying mechanisms, giving them the skills, and then putting them in real-time practical situations so they can apply that knowledge. But humans need all three of those things. And my goal with that workshop is to make it the best workshop of its kind in the world. And so I'm aiming high there. But,
I love it. Hey,
yeah,
if you're going to go for it, you better go all the way, right?
that's it, man. And yeah, I want to take this workshop overseas, and I also want to make it virtual. But it's in its infancy. We've been running it for a year now, but it's gathered a lot of momentum here in New Zealand.
That is phenomenal. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Legend. Thank you so much for having me, man.
That was perfect. That was perfect. Let me write this down. All right, the next one we'll talk about intercepting stress, okay? And then you could talk about your 5-step method.
Man, let's have a sip of coffee.
Go for it. What time is it there?
It's 9:55. I listened to this podcast you did yesterday about like your morning routine. And so when I got up this morning and I had my coffee within the first 5 minutes of waking, I was like, man, I know I was sitting outside, getting my son, and I was like, man, I know I shouldn't be drinking this coffee. I know, it's probably better to wait an hour, but I was like, I can't.
You know what? I slowly worked myself towards that because I would, there's such a huge dopamine response, especially if you just enjoy coffee and your body's like craving it. It's just that connection. But I've started delaying it. I have noticed a significant difference. But that's really funny.
I'll give it a try.
Yeah, give it a shot. All right, here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Dave, I'm an entrepreneur, and I spent my big part of my career in sports, and stress is always coming at you, especially as somebody in business. Like, things can get crazy really fast, and something I want to get better at is responding to stress instead of reacting to stress. What do you think about that? How can I improve in this area?
Yeah, so first of all, when I think of responding versus reacting is based on that survival instinct of something happens and you just react. And that can get you out of trouble a bunch of times, right? That can actually be a strength. Of course it is. Like, if you put your hand on something hot, you take it straight off. It's designed to keep us safe, right? But there's certain situations where if you react, you end up in trouble. We see this all the time, right? Where you're reacting to something that someone said or someone that something's has done. Responding is your ability to be able to tap into your conscious mind in real time, to be able to take a step back, activate these higher brain centers and be more creative in your response, right? And the problem with being reactive is it's often based on patterns of behavior, patterns that we establish from traumatic events in our life. Now, to give you an example, when a traumatic event happens, you create safety barriers. In the medium term, that's great. That keeps us safe, right? We create this sort of safety net. The problem is when you don't know how to leverage stress and pressure properly and you don't understand it, those safety barriers can end up becoming long-term, right? We carry them on for not weeks, but months and years. And those patterns end up becoming detrimental to our health and performance because they hold us back. In some respect, they hold us back. And when we then go into these high-pressure, high-stress moments, those patterns come to the forefront, those subconscious patterns of behavior. It could be avoidance, it could be, perfectionism, it can be a raft of different things. But identifying those patterns is very important in order to respond and not react. So I've identified some of my patterns. Some of my patterns growing up were when there was stress and pressure, or my way of dealing with stress and pressure was through anger, right? That was a pattern for me. I identified that pattern and changed that pattern, but you can't change unless you identify your own subconscious, unconscious patterns of behavior. We have, we can talk about this as we go forward, but when I work with people, we have a system of being able to identify these patterns and being able to flip them on their head and create new patterns of behavior. It's called mindset themes. And those new patterns of behavior become the thing that you practice over and over again, and they become the subconscious patterns of behavior. But to your question, which I've gone a bit of a roundabout here. It was
No,
how to
you're hitting it on the head for me. I'm taking notes right now because this makes a lot of sense. If you want to respond correctly, you have to understand the pattern that you're operating out of.
Yeah, and the great thing is about being a human is you have the ability to change, right? We have the ability to change. And if you think about a business, right, a business has all these systems and protocols to be able to operate. Do you have a system and protocol for the most important thing you have, your mindset? Do you have a system and protocol for that? And the answer for most people is no. And that's what the mindset themes is about writing these systems, these protocols out that you live by, that dictate the way you respond to things. Your mindset is the rules and regulations you live by that dictate the way you respond to things. And that's incredibly powerful. So I talked about like anger being one of my patterns of behavior. With my mindset themes, I flipped that on the head. And now my mindset is I do not lose control. I remain calm no matter what. That has been massive for me. Now that was just a decision to write that out and to live by it, right? And now I don't, it's just subconscious for me now. If someone pulls in front of me in the car, I do not give it my energy. Why would I? Why would I give that thing my energy? My energy is so important to me. And I have this other great mindset theme, which is my mindset is I do not view thoughts as good or bad, but as situations to respond to, and it's my response to the thought that matters. We live in a day and age now where everyone on social media is a mental health advocate, right? Like everyone's telling us, and that's cool. Like the information out there is so good, but it's also, there's too much information, I feel, and like we can get lost in that information. But people are telling us you have to have positive thoughts. No, you don't. I have all sorts of messed up thoughts in a day. It's not the thought that matters, it's what you do with that thought. You bring that thought in, you change the language around that thought, and you respond in a creative way. That's powerful. That's how you intercept this stuff. Not going out there and just thinking positively all the time. That doesn't man. Yeah,
It doesn't work. I mean, you can't control the thoughts that enter your head. Like if you say, Eric, don't think about a purple cow, guess what I'm going to think about?
Yeah.
I'm going to think about a purple cow or whatever. It's just a friend of mine, Dr. Alex Auerbach, he and I had a great conversation about this. He's a director of wellness for the Toronto Raptors. He's like, Eric, you can't control, like you could be at the free throw line and something comes in your head like, I'm going to brick.
Yeah.
And then you go, no, because I'm going to go back to my technique. I'm going to focus. There is a myth that the best don't feel pressure.
Mm.
And I don't know if you know who, Sir Chris Hoy, the greatest Olympic cyclist of all time, said when he was articulating what it felt like to race in Olympic finals, his first Olympic finals, he said, it felt like I was going to the gallows.
Mm.
Like the guy thought he felt like he was being executed.
Mm.
And I don't know about you, but like at my best moments, when you show up and you get it done, like right before you feel like you're going to vomit. But if you trained, then you can harness your attention and focus on execution. And then that's typically when you perform your absolute best if you've trained, right? You're either trained or untrained. So I am completely gelling with what you're saying here.
Yeah. I don't think the body knows the difference between stress and excitement. I think it's the same hardwired mechanisms, right? Like, so you can leverage stress to excitement. You can leverage that in real time, and you can use this uncomfortable feeling you get in your chest and in your stomach, and your mind's racing. You can use that and convert it into excitement. It's just about how you understand how to leverage that in real time, and that just comes through practice, right? It comes through understanding and practice.
Don't you have a 5-step method for dealing with this? I believe I've heard you talk about this before.
Yeah, so this goes back to like my work as an intensive care paramedic, and I had to like driving to these jobs. I've noticed my hands would start getting clammy. I could feel my heart racing. My mind started ticking over, and I was like, it was really putting me off my job. And I was like, right, I've got to come up with a system to be able to leverage this stuff in real time. And this is this 5-step method. And the reason why this is so powerful is because it intercepts stress here, psychological stress pertaining to your mind, and it intercepts stress in your body. And actually, we need both, what we call top-down control of stress and bottom-up control of stress. I'll take you through this 5-step method. It is very easy to apply in real time. The first thing is you have to embrace stress and pressure. You have to learn to go towards it and embrace it. That can just be that you're in a moment which is overwhelming for you, and you just have a little chat to yourself. Hey, this is where I am right now. This is where I need to be. I'm going to embrace it. I imagine myself grabbing it and pulling it in. That's embracing stress for me. The second thing, which is incredibly powerful in terms of intercepting stress here in your mind, is changing the language. How simple. Change the language. I'm no good. I'm not ready for this. I'm Dave Wood. I'm going to absolutely go out there and smash this. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm gonna do this thing. You know, that's just changing your language. So easy to do in real time. That has a ripple-on effect through every single cell in your body. Shifting your perspective. The more ways you have to look at something, the more choices you have. So number 2 and 3 are kind of tied together. You may be looking at something through one lens, just move around a little bit, look at it through a different lens. Shifting your perspective is incredibly powerful. So now we've intercepted some of how stress affects our mind, psychological stress. Now we get into the body. And the number 4 is conscious control of your breathing. Take conscious control of your breathing. Inhale, hold, exhale, relax. Or just inhale and prolong the exhale. Soft, quiet, light. This allows you to tap into your physiological response to stress, which is normally to upregulate things, right? Well, you're doing the opposite. You're taking your breathing and you're slowing it down. That sends signals to your brain that you're in a calm state. That allows you to grab the switch and dial it back a little bit into that more calming part of your nervous system. And the last thing, and this is incredibly powerful, this last one, is a body scan. Find where you're holding tension and let it go. Often in these high pressure, high stress moments, we are in a brace state, fight, flight, or freeze, and we hold that tension in our muscular skeletal system. And we tend to go into this isometric contraction of our chest, shoulders, jaw, neck muscles.
I find that I don't even breathe.
Yeah, exactly. You're sort of, people normally do one of 3 things when they're stressed in terms of their breathing. They will hold their breath, they will shift their breath into the upper chest, or they will, what we call breath stack. Normal inhale, small exhale. Normal inhale, small exhale.
Oh, and that's just driving you up the stress continuum.
Exactly. And so when you implement this 5-step method in real time, and by the way, these steps end up merging. You know, you inhale, exhale, relax while you're doing your body scan. This can be done within 10 seconds. I just want to give a very quick example of how I used this in real time recently. I had to talk in front of 300 people. I've never done that before at a health summit. About 5 minutes before going out, I felt this overwhelming stress and pressure. And I really got in my headband. I started even saying to myself, my presentation's not right. I'm going to get up there, and what happens if I just flop and this whole thing, you know? And I started even visualizing it happening. Well, it's easy to keep going down that road. I brought it back. I embraced it, did that thing. Imagine I'm just grabbing the whole thing, bringing it in. I started changing the language. I'm ready for this. I'm going to get up there and absolutely smash it. Straight away, when you embrace stress, you've got the control. Changing the language started intercepting stress here for me. That when you intercept stress here, it has a downward effect into your body. And then I just went through that, shifting my perspective of it. I took a couple of breathing cycles. For me, I just inhale, I hold at the top for 2 to 3 seconds, and I just do a long exhale. When the exhale is longer than the inhale, it creates a more calming effect in the body. Again, I'll say that when the exhale is longer than the inhale, it creates a more calming effect in the body. It activates the parasympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system, the calming division of your nervous system. And then the last thing I did was just went through and relaxed all those muscles, and then I went up there and smashed it. But it's easy to keep going down the wrong route, right?
I love this. This is like one of the most practical methodologies that I've heard of. I think anybody can do this in any situation. And you've got me fired up to come to New Zealand to join one of your workshops.
Oh man, we would love to have you here. We just had, on our last workshop, we had a guy come over from Australia, and he brought all these hexoskins, which are designed to measure your heart rate variability, blood pressure, heart rate, breathing rate. And what we did is we put these hexoskins on the participants that were on the workshop, and we showed them that we do this 20-minute breathing flow that's designed to shift you into a calm state. And we were able to show them the effect that had on their nervous system. We were able to show them in real time with the data their body's shifting into that parasympathetic, that blue zone, that calming state through heart rate variability. That's probably getting, if we went into that, it's probably getting a little bit amongst the weeds. But what these participants were able to do is see in real time, and it was very emotional for them. Being able to see it on a screen, like you pick out that individual and you show them that they're able to shift into a calm state. Take an individual that is chronically stressed, then being able to see that they can actually take control is incredibly powerful. Just take something like the ice bath. You get these people in the ice bath and they're able to control that by controlling their breathing and by controlling this thing. That has massive ripple-on effects into every single facet of performance and health. And that's where, the ice bath is where we're practicing the stress, getting in there. We want to put ourselves into the red. We want to be in a stress state because that affords us the opportunity to be able to push back against it and control it.
I love it. I think it's a practical tool. A lot of people are espousing the benefits of it, but I would say 95% of people don't really know how to use it as the tool that they need to use it for. And you guys are using it to elicit a state and then to give people the methodologies to then work through that state and regain control. It's kind of like if you want somebody to be good at free throw shooting, you'd run them up and down the court for a while, make them shoot, get the free throw line now. Put it into practice. I believe it was the Lithuanians. I think it was the Lithuanians. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was them.
I'm going to quote you on it.
They were doing, yeah. I believe they were the ones that won. There was a surprise world championship. I believe it was them. And I was kind of digging into what they were doing. And at the time I'd been working with basketball and they were doing a lot of auto-regulatory things. And they would just put players in a specific state of stress and then make them execute their skills, give them tools and mechanisms to auto-regulate using biofeedback. And that's exactly what you're doing. That's a very valid way of doing it. And a lot of people are like, oh, we're just going to use ice baths to make us tougher. No, you got to have a methodology. You can go jump in a pool of cold water and just freeze your butt off, or you can have a tool to train yourself. And so that's what you guys have got.
Yeah, I love it that you brought that up because if you're just sitting in an ice bath and you don't know why you're there, you're just sitting in cold water. Yeah, it makes no sense. So, man, when this comes back to this thing of understanding the underlying mechanisms of stress and pressure. When that person gets into an ice bath, they have to have a visual representation of what their autonomic nervous system is doing. It's pinging into the red, right? They have that visual representation of that. That gives them so much more ability to be able to apply these skills. And we give the analogy that you're grabbing the dimmer switch and you're turning it back towards that parasympathetic. You're never going to be in a parasympathetic state in an ice bath, right? You're always going to be in an upregulated stress state, but it's where you are on that continuum of way in the red, where you're able to grab the switch and toggle it back a little bit and take control and work with the agitation. And when you do that in the ice bath, you then take that and you apply it into everything. These are the practical settings that we need to be able to leverage stress and pressure. Understand the underlying mechanisms, give them the skills, the breathing, the meditation, whatever they do on a day-to-day basis. They create a routine, viewing natural sunlight in the morning, going for a walk on the beach. All these stuff are the skills. Then the application becomes the ice bath, the sauna, the pool work. We do the stress mitigation training on the beach. Or for me, it's about getting if we just talk about athletes, I always think take them out of the sport and put them into an unfamiliar environment. That's why we use the pool and they're crawling along the bottom of the pool. It's all unfamiliar. Teach them the skills there, and then they take that and apply it back into what they're doing. The best athletes are the ones that are able to take something and apply it back into life or sport.
No, I love what you guys are doing. I think it's phenomenal. Like I said, I don't want to say this and sound like I think so highly of myself, but when I was listening to, you and I mentioned before, I was listening to your podcast, one of these podcasts you're on. I was like, I think I found my twin down in New Zealand. I mean, I was just like, I love this guy. Not that I want to live in an echo chamber by any means, because I like to be challenged, and I've gained a lot just from this conversation. This 5-step method is something I'm going to use. But it's really great to hear that you're able to pour into elite athletes with really good information, because there's a lot of charlatans out there. And this is really solid stuff that people can really benefit from.
Yeah, man, I just want to come back to that point that it's about the basics. We overcomplicate things. We look for convoluted solutions to simple problems. The stuff that I'm doing with the athletes, it's basic stuff. Yeah, the mechanisms, delving into the nervous system, all that, it gets in depth. But actually, the skills and the practical applications that we put people in, they're not convoluted. If someone's trying to sell you something convoluted, they don't know what they're talking about. It should be simple. It's like trying to design a simplistic house is much harder than trying to, putting all the angles and everything in. Like, simplicity is harder. So the complexity is in the simplicity. Things should be simple and easy to apply.
I love it. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. If you guys want to follow Dave, you can find him on Integrated Training on Instagram. He's got a great website. A new one's come out. And he's got a phenomenal workshop if you want to hop on a plane. Hopefully soon you're bringing it stateside to a wonderful beach near us. But thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I really love what you're doing as well, man. This platform that you've got here is so powerful and so educational. I've listened to 2 of these small, 14, 15-minute podcasts, and I learned heaps, and it's just hearing it from a different perspective. And yeah, man, what you're doing is powerful, and we need more of this stuff. So yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.